I want to do a little editorializing again this morning, and so let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel 37. Can you guys hear me? Ezekiel 37. This is the vision of the Valley of Dry Bones, and of course, the idea is that this is a prophecy of the church, where the gospel comes and the dead come to life. And God, in verse 14, he says, Ezekiel 37:14, he said, I'll put my spirit within him, in you, and you will come to life, and I'll place you on your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken and done it, declares the Lord. Now, we live in the time where we know the Lord has spoken, we know the Lord has done this because of the New Testament. My initial focus here is on verse 10, where he said, I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they came to life and stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army. See, God intends for the church to be pictured as an army. That's one of his pictures. And the idea is to march and to conquer, and all the things that go with the discipline and everything else. Now, I pulled, I think Mr. Luke Wilson sent me an article from the Wall Street Journal, no less. And I think it was Mr. Luke. It's on the riots and stuff that are happening on sundry college campuses all across the country, like a hand just waves across the whole country, and all these spontaneous riots sprang up. And the article, the heading on it basically said that this is all planned ahead of time, which that's not a surprise to anybody. And so I pulled a couple quotes out of here. You have to understand who these guys are. When they say, okay, we're going to make everybody that's in these riots, you don't get to be a student anymore. Didn't bother most of them because they weren't students anyway. So obviously something else going on. Now, if you ever watched the YouTube video Anarchy USA, which I'd recommend doing that if you haven't done it. They do that was put together late 1960s after the Watts riots. Now, Katie went to work for Pepperdine University. He went to Pepperdine University where the campus was right next to Watts, right? And the riots had just died down when she started on campus there. So gives you an idea. There are contemporary people here, from the late 1960s riots. And it does a good job of pointing out how they organize and work to produce this cadre. Now, you have to recognize that they're communist. They're not going to call them communist on the news media. Even the conservative news media is not going to call them communist. But that's exactly what they are. And so I have a couple quotes here pulled from this article. This is talking about the Columbia University riots. This one of the organizing groups. It says that same day on X, which used to be Twitter. I don't know, X. That means you cross it off. I don't know. That same day on X, the group posted drawings with, quote, friendly advice, unquote, to protesting students. One suggested they wear comfortable clothes and running shoes and bring water, an energy bar, and a bandana in case of surveillance, okay? Now, you got to understand, these guys that organize these, they're your revolutionaries. And they tend to pull in all kinds of people that they call useful idiots for their work. I think one of the quotes is that communism must be built with non-communism hands. So a lot of times you'll have people in these marching in these things that don't really know, why they're doing it, but it seemed like a good thing to do at the time. One of the ladies we work with in Great Falls, I think her son and daughter-in-law were marching in a women's march in Seattle, and he had no idea whether gets something to do on the weekend. I don't know. But that's the type of thing that they do. They pull these people in. Another Another referred to police as pigs. Taking you right back to the 1960s there, right? And offered this advice: if someone is arrested, don't linger too long or the pigs will kettle the march. See, referring to a crowd control tactic, okay? And if somebody gets arrested, free the comrade, or else get their name and birth date for jail support and keep it moving. Comrade. Okay? See, the purpose of this is to make us a little bit aware as what's really going on. You want to pay attention to that. Here's another quote under the heading, Discipline and Rigor. A guy by the name of Polat said student organizers at Columbia learned the discipline and planning needed to pull off an effective protest movement, not only from their work with veteran demonstrators and outside groups, but from participating in Black Lives Matter marches or student labor organizing. Okay? In other words, they're gaining experience and training all along, and Black Lives Matter was one of the things. Now it's campus pro-Palestine, it's Palestinian. Doesn't matter the issue. See, somebody asked one of the revolutionaries one time, says, how come you guys have this position here, and after a while you got exactly contrary position? He said, well, it's not about the position, it's about the revolution. See, in other words, it doesn't matter, and it's whatever the pretext for the revolution is, that's what we do, all right? Participating. So the Anarchy USA points out that these are all training, getting people ready for the final conflict. Okay. Here's another quote. It says, Sari Makdisi, a University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, in other words, English professor, and member of the True Schools chapter of Faculty for Justice in Palestine, said his school's encampment had organized self-defense teams on the front lines. Participants, who were confronted several times by pro-Israel counter-protesters, had to undergo nonviolent de-escalation training. The training was put on by students who themselves had received prior training in nonviolent resistance. Okay, I remember Martin Luther King Jr., as they prepared to demonstrate a celebration of the 450th anniversary of the founding of St. Augustine, Florida, he said, we intend to use all the nonviolent weapons at our disposal. Nonviolent weapons? Okay, just got to understand these guys, okay? And he said, and it's that key line here, he said there's a whole set of discipline and procedures that go into it. Whole set of discipline. See, in other words, these guys are being trained. And you can see it's nationwide. It's and in other words, they got to have the discipline that when somebody, whoever's in charge gives orders, de-escalate, everybody de-escalates. See, for whatever purpose. It also follows that when somebody in charge says escalate, they escalate. Here's the kind of the final little quote here. Makdisi said that his generation of pro-Palestinian student protesters in the U.S. during the 1980s weren't nearly as disciplined and organized as the students he encountered at the UCLA encampment. Not nearly as disciplined back in the 1980s as they are in 2024. Discipline. See, this is an army. He said, we, back in the 1980s, had a lot of effect and feeling. He said, but there's a different kind of rigor to these students that's really striking. Okay. Now, see, my point is that the leftists have always required commitment. Okay, I think I've mentioned on occasion a book by Benjamin Gitlow entitled The Whole of Their Lives, okay? And so these are the revolutionaries, and that's what it takes. Now, you understand that we in the church have to have the same time of discipline, rigor, and the whole of our lives commitment. See, in order to do what we need to do in the midst of this environment. Just Colossians chapter 3. Colossians 3 in verse 4. Colossians 3:4, he says, when Christ, who is our life, is revealed, then you'll also be revealed with him in glory. See, what I'm working on here is that too many times Christians have a perspective that they live their life and they have the church as a positive add-on. Okay? Which, can work in a reasonably mellow society. Okay, but we're moving past a reasonably mellow society to where we're going to have the commitment that it's going to take. Now, when these guys, shall we say, sign up, okay, if they, let's say, we need you at Columbia University, okay, we need you at UCLA, we need you at Harvard, wherever they say, probably U of M will be next, but see, wherever we need you, that's where you go. Now, one of the things that's pretty clear is George Soros' money is behind a bunch of this. He's financing some shell operations that then funnel money to these other organizations that then do this on the ground organization work, that the training, the discipline it talks about. So in other words, this is coming always, as it does, from the top down. It's not a spontaneous uprising of the poor and working class. It never has been. You go back to the Bolshevik communist revolution of 1917 in Russia. See, that was financed by John D. Rockefeller. It was financed by Max Warburg. The Rothschild and Rockefeller families are what brought about the communist revolution in Russia in 1917. They used the hammer and the sickle, the farmer and the worker, the uprising of the poor and working class, but it's actually total control imposed from the top down. See, while brainwashing people at the bottom to think that they're going to get something out of it. What they don't realize is they're all being used, as one of the ladies on the Anarchy USA said, cannon fodder. Just cannon fodder in a violent and bloody revolution. We need to be spiritual revolutionaries. See, we need to have the commitment, the same type of dedication, the same type of discipline. See, in order for us to carry out what God intends us to carry out is this mighty resurrected army. Okay? And part of that involves a commitment to making the local church go. Okay? See, in other words, if you lose the vision, okay, that we're building something, see, if you lose that vision, and then it becomes a matter, okay, this is my convenience, and I feel like it or I don't feel like it. See, you're missing where's the rigor and the discipline in that? There isn't any. See, and that's a lot of what we're dealing with, particularly in modern American society in general. It's programmed. See, it's designed through the social media and everything else to produce a people who do what they want to when they feel like it, don't do what they don't feel like doing. Okay, I don't feel like going to work today. All right, it's a labor economy, and they have to keep me around. So if I don't feel like showing today, I just won't. If I feel like coming to my job interview in my pajamas, then they're just going to have to accept me as I am. The culture has been deliberately created to attack the idea of rigor and discipline. The revolutionaries know they have to have the rigor and the discipline. Okay, but we as saints, see, sometimes we operate at our convenience. And the goal of Scripture, of course, is something called sacrifice. So we're going to have the vision, see where this plays out. In Matthew 13, the parables, just picking the one out of verse 44, Matthew 13:44, it says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid. Again, from joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Now, it's the kingdom of heaven that's worth it all. It's not heaven. It's the kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven, of course, is a name for the church. Now, how that's going to translate into the local congregation. See, it has to be the local congregation that's worth it all. This is where this goes. And otherwise, it isn't. See, because otherwise the kingdom of heaven is nebulous. All right, it's all right. See, and some people like to keep it nebulous. Say, well, I'm a part of the church at large. Okay, well, what's that? That's kind of like social justice, right? As soon as you put social in front of the word justice, it doesn't mean anything. Or hate speech. As soon as you put hate in front of it, speech doesn't mean anything. It means whatever you want. Church at large. See, where that, what's that mean? Well, whatever I want it to mean. But see, when you talk about the local congregation and the revolutionary type commitment it takes to build, see, that's where God's going with it. Now, you can't let petty things get in the way of that, okay? Yeah, we're at war, a very intense war. It's only just beginning to surface right now. Most people aren't aware. They're going to keep doing whatever they're doing, taking their time off, running their pleasure operations. It's not, it's distant, very distant. But it's not. It's not distant at all. These are the beginning stages of the fact that they got the discipline. You see, from the 1980s to 2024, you see, they're conscious of the progress that they've made in disciplining what they call the cadre. They're conscious of that. Okay, we need to be conscious of that and start thinking in terms of what are we going to do, to do our part and make the spiritual revolution go. That's why I chose the term spiritual revolution, is because trying to communicate, we have to have the same revolutionary zeal and commitment that the forces on the dark side have. Okay? If you don't, you're going to get run over. See, it's that simple. Now, nobody can make any decisions except for us on an individual basis. That's why the Scripture appeals rather than commands in that sense. Okay. One other thing is I want to go to 1 Timothy 3 here. 1 Timothy, of course, is written to Timothy, an evangelist, okay? And the evangelists have instructions that are specifically detailed in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. And then talking about both evangelists and in chapter 3, verse 1, it's a trustworthy statement. If man aspires to the office of overseer, it's a fine work he desires to do. And he gives the things that an overseer must possess in order to be one. You don't get to arbitrarily set those aside. What I'm driving at is that the local congregation is an organization. People don't get anything done unless they're organized. That's why, again, they talk about these guys being disciplined, to be able to have the discipline to not engage in violence against the pro-Israel forces. Who do you think's running the pro-Israel forces? Same guys. See, it's back like in the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, Charlottesville, Virginia, where they had these protests, and the white supremacist guys and the anti-white supremacist guys were getting off the same bus. getting off the same bus. You can see why at some point they don't want to, they want to de-escalate because the guys on the other side of the same army just catch it. But at some point, the guys on the other side won't be the same army. So we're in the midst of a tremendous psychological media blitz warfare, attacking Christianity at every point across the board. And so I'm appealing, that you, on an individual basis, make the commitment to make every assembly of the saints work. Build this thing, because that's the only hope there is. And encourage the brethren also to catch the vision. Whoever has the strongest vision is going to win. It's just that simple. You go out on the football field, and one team is committed, dedicated, and been training, and the other team has been lollygagging, thinking they can just go out there and have a good time at the game. Who do you think is going to get run over in that? I mean, that's just a simple illustration. Same way with armies. The U.S. military is being destroyed as rapidly as they possibly can, and also transferred to an international peacekeeping force rather than something that protects the life, liberty, and property of American citizens. These things are going on at every level. The capital gains tax proposal, where you're going to, be taxed on unrealized gains. So if you got your stocks and it popped up here, and they say, okay, you're going to pay this capital gains tax. You haven't sold it, but you're going to pay the tax on it anyway. Do you see where that's going? I mean, and they're happening on a big scale. And again, most of the public's unaware of it because they're going to soccer practice and playing baseball games, and got bowling league and all the other distractions. We need to be an undistracted people, who are absolutely committed to getting God's message out, making the local congregations that we're part of work. And it's organized. To think that, well, I'm going to just be a good Christian over here and not be a part of a local assembly. That's running counter to God's plan. Some people are where there's not a local assembly, and they're doing the best they can. There's, people watching here this morning all over the country. In fact, is all over the world that get in on this. And that's one of the reasons we do this. But if you're where there is a local assembly, you need to set aside whatever your issues are and make it work. Because the big picture is so big that whatever, a person's petty problems are, they're just that, they're petty. I read something this morning. A 70-year-old lady was looking back, a 72 or 73-year-old lady. She's looking back on her life about things she's done different. She said, when we were young ladies, late teens, early 20s, we were so concerned about, looking exactly right and trying to be as beautiful as the next lady. And she says, at my age, looking back on it, we were all beautiful, by comparison, right? And see, in other words, what was a big deal then shouldn't have been. See, and that's a great illustration of sometimes how people let small things get in the way of big things. And God doesn't want us to ever have that happen. It's organized. See, the local assembly is organized. And that's God's intention, that it be organized in order to carry out the sector of the advance, the strategic place that each local congregation plays in God's battle against the forces of darkness. And he needs 100% commitment from every single Christian on the field. That's what he needs, okay? And so we need to practice that on an individual basis, and we need to get the other brethren to start processing in those terms. I think Mel's got a comment.
When Hamas runs out of Jewish people to behead, guess who's next?
Oh, yeah.
They have a tremendous advantage. Killing you is not a problem for them.
Yeah. Yeah, killing
In
them.
fact, it's their goal.
Yeah, that's a jihad. That's
Yeah,
part of the jihad.
yeah.
That's what,
Yeah, and ours is to convert them, which definitely gives us a disadvantage.
at least in the physical realm, right?
Yeah,
Of course, once your head's gone, you're not going to be converting anybody. But on the other hand, maybe like Stephen, a lot of people get converted because you got your head beheaded, right? Yeah. Good comment, Mel. I just want to go back to something. There's a modern Jew. I use the term modern Jew because there's no current Jew that can trace his ancestry back. Okay, modern Jew by the name of Abraham Shifrin, who spent, I forget how many years, like 15 years or something, inside the concentration camps of the Soviet Union called the Gulag. Gulag, I think, is just the acronym for the Russian letters for that, Russian names for that prison system. At one point, there were 10 million people inside that prison system. And if you ever read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's book, the Gulag Archipelago, he's got names, people, they had the information network where they knew who was in there and how long, okay? And Abraham Shifrin then was one of these guys. He came to, modern Israel when he was able to get out of the prison. And so he had a listing of, they were keeping track of who the prisoners were, okay? The third largest group of prisoners in the Gulag were the Jews, modern Jews. The second largest group inside the Gulag system were political prisoners. The guys that just, protesting or running counter to Putin's policies or something, those type of guys. The largest group inside the Gulag were those that the Soviet Union considered Christians. You have to understand where this thing is going. You have to process it. And you have to make commitments and, programming, scripture memory. You have to do it now. Because later is too late. See, I'm sorry to have to bring this. But see, this Wall Street Journal just stood out to me. In fact, it was in the Wall Street Journal I thought was surprising. Wall Street Journal, of course, purports to be conservative. I think it's part of the Rupert Murdoch empire, which also included Fox. I think that's been divested to his sons or something. But, they're always playing this side, pretend to be on the right side for you guys. And but, they're part of the pincers movement. They're going to catch the public in between. And so we as Christians have to be aware. 2 Corinthians chapter 2. Paul's got a specific application for this, but there's a really general principle here. 2 Corinthians 2:11. He says, so that no advantage would be taken of us by Satan, for we're not ignorant of his schemes. See, God really wants us to be aware of the schemes so we can navigate spiritually successfully. Because otherwise you're going to get blindsided and be unprepared. Other comments or questions or thoughts? Mike?
I was trying to remember how long ago it was. It was 3 or 4 years ago when Black Lives Matter first came out. And they had interviewed a guy that was doing the recruiting. And it was so funny because they kept asking him, who signs your paycheck? Because he's getting paid to to recruit people. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, do you agree with what it is? And he said, no, I'm just drawing a paycheck. I have no concern in this. But yet, they asked him 3 or 4 times. Finally, it came out that yes, because they were asking him, was it Sorrel? And he finally admitted it. But he's like, well, where are you getting people from? And are they with whatever, rally that they're doing? Are they for that? And they're like, they don't care. They just want to be part of something.
Yeah.
And so it was just amazing that, like I said, you've seen Black Lives Matter signs all over, and it had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. Had absolutely nothing. You know, they were just using that wordage because when it came out to like all lives matter, well, then they would get highly upset, you know. But again, it was going to somebody else is pushing this, somebody else, they don't care. They just want to be part of something. And it just blows your mind.
Yep. Those are the useful idiots. See, now in there someplace are the dedicated revolutionaries recruiting your useful idiots to recruit others. That's a great point, Mike. I thought I saw another hand. Oh, okay. Luke and then Mill.
I think it's always been this way, but particularly now, I'm finding the greatest challenge in making disciples is getting people to plug in and like be a part of this, you know, God's plan, God's revolutionary plan for us as His army. And so I don't know if, I think there are a lot of the cultural things like you've talked about that are making that more difficult, but also just thinking about us as the church together collectively making disciples. It is really important that one of the things we can do in that process is when we do plug into everything, that as people do become Christians, they do kind of look around and say, what do Christians do? And so we can have a positive impact in building this. If we can keep that vision you're talking about in building this, then it does help the new people that are coming in also to see that and realize it's still a tremendous challenge, but to plug in. So I don't know if you have any comments about that.
Well, again, that's, having started congregation from zero, I can tell you that, that's your big challenge is to get people to plug in and have the vision. You're starting there and you got 3 people, okay, and you're in the process of reaching for the next one. It's really important that the 3 people you have be on board. See, it's very obvious because, if they're not there, they're on a bowling league or something and that gets in the way, okay, it's very obvious what happens to momentum, when there's that few people. But the same is actually true no matter how large the group is. It's the same exact principle. Everybody is really important. And the challenge, for guys like me is to try to get the individual Christian recognize how important he is. Just even a warm body helps, okay? It's be important to be more than a warm body, but, a warm body helps, see, because from the human side, what we're trying to do is create momentum. And you can see that all the way through the Scripture. Scripture doesn't use the word momentum. But see, John the Mercer, one of his main purposes was to create momentum that Jesus could step into. See, so that then when he's ready, he can take it to the next level so that the stage is set for Acts chapter 2. If you don't have any momentum, when you get to Acts chapter 2, what have you got? Nothing. See, so God was actually, if you look at it, God was building toward Acts chapter 2 from Genesis 1:1. See, so momentum. And so, again, trying to help people process, look, I can be an important part of this, and I need to be consistent. See, consistency is a big winning factor. So, Mel?
I'm trying to think about how many years back, it must have been 50 years back there about, I was superintendent for a painting contractor. And it was a Friday afternoon, I was in my office and a young black fella came in and this secretary sent him over to me in my office and he was looking for a job, okay? And he was all enthusiastic about it, being a painter and et cetera. And in fact, he said, I'd like to advance to the point where I got your job. Okay, no, it's just fine. Anyway, I ended up hiring him. I said, okay, be here Monday morning at 7:30. Okay, white coveralls, white shirt, a scraper, one 2-inch scraper in your pocket, and a screwdriver. Okay, that's all the tools you need. as far as getting in the union, I'll get you in the union, 'cause you'd have to become union working at this particular operation, okay? I'm still waiting for him to show up on Monday morning. Now, it took a couple of weeks for us to realize what had happened. He had a job already. He was working for the U.S. government, okay? Looking for a job, and if I didn't hire him, then a couple of weeks later, they send a white guy in, and I hire him. We were going to be in big trouble. But it didn't at the time that it occurred, it didn't occur to me. He was going down the street, door after door, and see if he could get a job. Can you get my point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the way Satan operates, see, so that's why our total commitment has to be involved. Any other comments or thoughts here? Question this morning?
Seizure of your property, I can't remember where it's
Okay,
at.
go to Hebrews 10. Yeah, that's a good example here. The church in Jerusalem was being prepared to have a similar type thing coming from the hands of the Romans, okay? And of course, this is going to result in the total destruction and fall of Jerusalem and the temple, which had been prophesied even in the Old Testament. Verse 32, Hebrews 10:32, he said, remember the former days when after being enlightened. He's talking about the church back in Acts chapter 8, okay? It had to go through all this. Remember the former days after being enlightened, you endured great conflict of sufferings, partly by being made a public spectacle through reproaches and tribulations, okay? White nationalist, right, comes to mind, okay? It was always interesting. President Clinton was the first real black president we had. But Clarence Thomas is a white judge, I mean, it's got nothing to do with color. It's got everything to do with the revolutionary agenda, see? Being made a public spectacle, see, through reproaches and tribulations, partly by becoming sharers with those who were so treated. You showed sympathy to the prisoners, accepted joyfully, there you go, Jerry, joyfully the seizure of your property, knowing that you have for yourselves a better possession and a lasting one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. You have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. For yet in a very little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. There's that, the righteous live by faith line. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith to the preserving of the soul. So the quotation here, of course, comes from Habakkuk, which is looking to the original Babylonian destruction and captivity, okay? Being applied here directly to the destruction of Jerusalem. But you can see it also applies to the destruction of the world. Okay, if we bounce to Matthew 24. It's going to come down to, what's important to us. And, the little tests that we're going through now, are, again, preparation for bigger tests. That's the way God works, okay? So Matthew 24, talking about Jesus' second coming inside the setting of the destruction of the temple. So when he says in verse 28, wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather, that's a reference to the destruction of Jerusalem at the hands of the Romans, okay? You go to Luke 17. There he is talking about Jesus' second coming, the day that the Son of Man's revealed. And verse 37, Luke 17:37, answering, they said to him, where, Lord? And he said to them, where the body is, there the vultures will be gathered. There he's talking about the rotting corpse of a world that's rejected Jesus as a Messiah. And he's using the same picture that the vultures be gathered. Okay, and so the point is, the destruction of Babylon was a foretype of the destruction of Jerusalem, which is a foretype of the destruction of the world. Okay, so we're in the period of time where the destruction of the world's imminent. Okay, you know, the men of Issachar back in the Old Testament, they were men who understood the times, and they knew it was time to come and stand with David. So you see these little things throughout the Scripture. See that design. Jesus talked about it. He said, look at. He said, can't you discern the sign of the times? Okay, when you see, red in the morning, look out, right? Red in the afternoon. Okay, I mean, he said, you know what the weather's going to do next. You got an idea of that. You're better than the weatherman. Okay, but it says you can discern the signs. See, we can do that too, if we're willing. See, if we're willing to take an objective look, because no matter which direction you look, see, the bag is being pulled closer and closer down, ready for the drawstring to be pulled. See, it could be pulled at any time. So we need to just take that into account and get the spiritual things going. Okay, there's a very little you can do to stop the government at this point. Okay, that's one of the messages being communicated, is you can't stop us. Okay, state of Montana elected a very conservative legislature, right? They enacted a lot of laws to try to protect Montana's freedom. What are the courts doing to it? Dismantling it. They're just dismantling it. What happens at the national level? Same thing. Executive branch now issues executive orders, and Congress tries to stop it. If Congress tries to stop it, then the courts intervene. See, that you just have to say, okay, I understand where this is going, and be real about it, and make our earthly plans. You got to still make a living and all the things, but you want to get your spiritual priorities in order, and keep them in order, and try to encourage everybody around you to get their spiritual priorities in order and keep them in order. That's good advice. The frontier people, when they crossed the Appalachian Ridge, the first thing they figured out was the only way they could stay safe was to build a stockade. So if you ever read any of Zane Grey's novels, at what's now Wheeling, West Virginia, Fort Henry, built a stockade. Okay, so every station, as they called it in those days, every station had the stockade. And that's where the people would come when the Indians are attacking, stockade. Like say, Katie's ancestors, they broke into Polk Station and carried one of Katie's ancestors, a lady, and her children with her all the way to Detroit. I mean, that was real stuff in 1780s, okay? You had to plan. So when it came time for them to finally cross the plains stopped them for a while. They couldn't figure out, because there's no wood. See, they couldn't figure out how to cross. But finally, they developed the idea of the wagon train. Now we can cross to Oregon and California by wagon train. So they just took the stockade and made the circle. See, the wagon train circle. That was just the outgrowth of the stockade, the stations. Why did they do that? Well, because that's how they took an analysis of the situation in which they're living and said, this is what we got to do in order to protect ourselves and keep ourselves going. Okay? We live in a time where we need a spiritual stockade. See, and the name of that stockade is the local congregation. That's the name of that stockade, is the local congregation. By God's design. And so you can see the letters and everything are written to the brethren to help them process how life is going to be in the stockade. It's interesting. See, some of those stockades were under siege for like a year. And so you have, 150 people crowded into a small stockade. Disease and everything else was rampant, almost starvation. Sometimes they'd try to set it up so a hunting party could go out get some provisions. Okay, what if they don't work together in that stockade? What if they don't work together on the wagon train? You know, and there's records of times they didn't, okay? Very interesting. Every wagon train from the frontier people headed west, the first thing they did is they wrote a constitution for the wagon train. There's actually a constitution for the wagon train that Katie's ancestors, when they started from Oaktown, Indiana, most of them family members, they still wrote a constitution for the wagon train. See, it's going to be orderly. So you can see the stockade here, the local congregation, has got a constitution. It's a New Testament. It tells us how to govern ourselves. And so we need to pay attention to those instructions and govern ourselves accordingly and keep in mind the big picture so that the little things don't wipe you out, don't discourage you, don't get you off track. That's Satan's goal, get you off track. He doesn't care how he does it, just get you off track. See? So seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness. Good advice, but actually not just advice. It's how you're going to live. So Christ is our life. Mel?
I'm sure that everybody understood the wagon train. Every night they circled, and the livestock was all inside the circle, because without your horses, you weren't going anywhere.
Yeah, because the Indians were really good horse thieves. Okay, yeah. So yeah, everything is reason. See, so Scripture's given us everything, how to conduct ourselves for a very good reason. So don't ignore them. See, pay attention to it, study it, look it over, think it over. You know, if necessary, accept joyfully the seizure of your property.